Hello, Stephen King. Hello, Stevens? Are you there, Stevens? How many of you wrote this book? Oh, 39% of you wrote The Shining. Thank you for being here. You're probably using one of your many pseudonyms. Isn't Stephen King and Dean Koontz the same person? Sounds right. There was no option for did nothing. I thought people would say they were Stephen King if they did nothing, but I think people just wanted to say they were Stephen King. All right, 10% of people, 11% of people read the book, 22% of people have seen the movie, 28% of people read the book and watched the movie. We will disregard the Stephen Kings. I didn't add an option, but a lot of us watched Dr. Sleep last night. That was fun. So yeah, just say right up front, this stream book club meeting will contain spoilers for The Shining book, The Shining movie, and the film version of Dr. Sleep. I have not read the Stephen King Dr. Sleep sequel, but I read about it. Don't disregard all the spoilers. Does that need to be said? I'm not someone who usually thinks of these things. Or even with like the scary movies we watched this month, I saw a few people talking about like content warnings, those sorts of things. I feel like it's kind of on, we're all adults here, right? We can think of what sort of things we need to think about there. Daylight savings threw me off. Did we lose an hour last night? Or gain an hour? Did that happen? Why does it not feel better? We gained an hour? Okay. It's 3 p.m. I'm all messed up. I couldn't sleep last night. I was thinking about being my shining power. Daylight savings is so nice. Okay, first question about book club. Is daylight savings necessary? All right. Do we have a lot of people here who didn't read the book? Because often I find that's the case and then I end up having to explain the book. But I feel like maybe I just won't do that today. You know, like the synopsis. Is that fair? Let's talk about The Shining. The Shining is a book by Stephen King. Do a new poll. Yeah, I could just simplify the poll for just read or not read. Did you read the book? How about this first edition cover, by the way? When you were reading, those of you who actually read the book, is this what you were picturing them to look like? Like, I definitely had all the preconceptions of having seen the movie many times and thinking of that as, you know, canon. But yeah, when I saw this cover for the first time, I thought that it really threw me off. Kind of possessed demon child vibes. Wendy, I guess Wendy does have blonde hair, but she looks like stuck up British royalty or something. I loved Shelley Duvall in the movies. Me too, Sin. And we're going to get into it. I think I want to frame a lot of this conversation around the differences between the book and the movie. And I think that's interesting or relevant to book discussion because it says a lot about what Stephen King didn't like about the movie in terms of what he wanted the book to represent or say. She's dark blonde in the book's description? I don't know, man. I don't know. The hotel, the fucking topiary animals. I liked the book and movie. Well, we'll get into that. So, first of all, preconceptions. For me, I have seen The Shining. I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick. The Shining is one of my favorite films of his. I got really interested in one point. Like, I've seen his wife filmed a behind the scenes sort of documentary, sort of featurette that you can find on YouTube that's really interesting. I've watched movies or videos about people's different interpretations of the movie and symbols they think Kubrick inserted into the movie. I'm a fan of the Shining movie. I was aware that Stephen King wasn't a big fan of the Shining movie. And the main thing I sort of understood at a superficial level is that my impression was that the book had way more to do with Jack's alcoholism. And that the book was very much a metaphor for his struggles with addiction, bringing out the worst in him, as opposed to being just more explicitly a spooky story about a haunted hotel. And I kind of knew this because I vaguely remember as a child seeing a TV, like a made-for-television version of The Shining that I think Stephen King was involved in, that did just have way more about the dad having a drinking problem. So those were my preconceptions going in. The movie looms large in my understanding of what The Shining is and is about. Feel like I'm missing anything here? Like, before you read the book, is there something like you definitely thought the book was about? Can't find anywhere to stream it. Oh, you're talking about the made-for-TV version? I don't know where. We could take a look. I could look for it after. I think it was made in the 90s. I'm sure you could find articles about it because Stephen King was very public in his statements about not liking Kubrick's take on his story. Before I read the book, I'd never seen the whole movie. Interesting. I thought it was just about a gifted child with the power of telecommunication. Okay. I will say right off the bat, what I like about The Shining, and this applies to the movie and the book, is that I feel like the world that King sort of built, that is, a lot of people have this slight ability of like precognition or clairvoyance. I really liked a scary story sort of being grounded in that idea as opposed to haunted house, or we brought this medium or psychic into a haunted house to talk to the ghosts. The sort of thing you get from, what are those modern horror movies? The ones in the, not The Nun. The one what's the one like about ghost hunters? Anyway, my point is, I think all of us can sort of relate to a bit of that feeling. The Conjuring, I think. I don't know. Maybe. I think a lot of us can relate to this feeling of, I was thinking about my brother and then he texted me on the phone. Or I was thinking about something random and then it sort of happens. The little feeling of the opposite of deja vu, right? Like, I feel like everyone can relate to that in a bit of a way, even if most of us can accept that's mostly just coincidence. But it feels like there may be some sort of level of intuition that we don't really understand. I think the movie just basically playing on an exaggerated version of that, and that some people have that sort of like hyper-attuned version of that, I think is a way better grounding for a scary story than your typical haunted house ghost story type of narrative. And I think that's true of the book and the movie. That's what I like about it. I think enough of us had either seen the movie or the book that I'm not going to do some exhaustive synopsis here. I think the one on Wikipedia is pretty good. Again, I think I'm mostly going to focus more on the differences between the book and the movie to sort of tease out what the story is there. I think it's important to note that the book does do way more exposition or character building around Jack's alcoholism. Like we already talked about how he lost his job at his prep school as a teacher for assaulting a student. He has some rich student on the debate team just because his dad's pressuring him to being a lawyer. He's like mean to the student. Like, Jack Torrance isn't a good guy. I think a lot of the speculation, or a lot of people think it's just Stephen King sort of exercising his own demons. Stephen King had a lot of substance abuse issues, and it kind of feels like the Jack character is sort of that exploration of the bad sides of himself, maybe. And maybe that makes book Jack Torrance not a good person, but there's at least some sympathy for seeing him as a human being. So yeah, it gets into, like, you see about like Jack's childhood and how violent his father was and how he witnessed his father just assaulting his mom. You see why Jack sort of stopped drinking, and it's not out of some moment of realization that he's like destroying his family. It's because he probably kills a kid in a hit and run, just decides to not look for the body anymore, and just like they realize they maybe dodged a bullet, right? That was at the very beginning of the book. Maybe I'm misremembering that a little bit. But it's basically the case that him and his friend are driving around drunk. They hit a kid. They just see a bike in the middle of the road, but they can't find a body. So they just leave, and that's when they agree to stop driving. And to stop drinking, sorry. And then, yeah, like the first section of the book really is more about their marital problems than anything else. The part for me that was much more scary than all the supernatural stuff was how he treats Danny. Yeah, so it does, in both the book and the movie, it's the case that Jack did hurt his son. In the book, it's Danny was messing with his papers, his writing. He sort of grabs him by the arm to spank him, and he grabs his arm too hard and breaks his arm. I think in the movie, they just say he dislocates his shoulder. And I want to say, yeah, it was... I'm curious what people's take on this, because I think the book did a good job of weaving sort of in between this, like, here's this really troubled and very flawed guy who, even when he's acknowledging his shortcomings, is kind of justifying them. I think this comes through in his treatment of his wife, Wendy, more than his treatment of Danny, actually. Like he kind of realizes he's a piece of shit, but then he makes a bunch of excuses for why he's a piece of shit. I actually think he's a really good depiction of a weak, pathetic man who blames other people for his problems. Like, he's a very believable character in that way. I mean, like, the guy represents failure in a lot of ways. Even in the hotel, once he becomes a vessel for the hotel to kill his child because the hotel wants his child to be part of the hotel, let's say. He can't even win at that. And the hotel sort of goads him into being like, you couldn't even take care of your wife? Like, what kind of man are you? I think in that way, like, even the hotel is sort of that toxic, masculine, like, oh, you couldn't even get the better of a woman thing, you know? So anyway, that sort of, there's a lot of context to the Jack character and his problems that is definitely absent in the movie. And to me, that was the most significant difference. Like, yes, there are literal narrative differences in the story, but to me, the biggest difference is the Jack character. It's very clear in the book that the hotel wants Danny for his powers. Is that as obvious in the movie? I don't know, but I'm not sure that really matters. I want to get into this in a little bit, but I think one of the biggest differences between the movie and the book is the book just really explains things in a way that I don't think actually necessarily lend to it being a better piece of art. The movie has like none of the lore from the book. Yeah. Should we just skip ahead to that? So differences between the book and the movie. King was quoted as saying Kubrick's The Shining, I felt like it was very cold. We're looking at these people, but they're like ants in an anthill. They aren't doing interesting things, these little insects. And he went on to talk about how he feels like he has a lot of warmth in his books. In my experience, anecdotally, from reading about the book and movie, I've noticed that people who really like the book who then see the movie tend to not like the movie. But people who like the movie who then read the book usually enjoy the book too. And I think that's telling. I've already explained why I think I like the core idea of The Shining as a story and how that's true in both. I kind of feel like the book had a bit of a problem over explaining things. There's a scene in the movie where the hotel is very much coming alive. Wendy's running around looking for Danny. Jack had just been breaking through the bathroom with an axe when he hears Halloran coming, so he leaves. So Wendy's running around the hotel looking for Danny. She's not sure if her husband has murdered her child at this point. And as she rounds the corners of the hotel, she sees a man in a tuxedo whose head is cracked open saying, "What a great party we're having, right?" And she rounds another corner and down the hallway through a door, she sees a man in a bear suit who was just engaged in a sex act with a man in a suit. And they just stare at her like she's the one doing something wrong. All of these moments to me are sort of burned in my brain as just incredibly compelling, amazing filmmaking, disturbing, scary. It's borderline funny in a way that makes you uncomfortable, but that plays into the horror. And I guess my point is, in the movie, those things work, and I don't need to know why there is a guy in a bear costume giving a blowjob to a guy in a suit. Whereas reading the King book, it seems like it goes into great lengths to explain why, because the Las Vegas mob was here and this guy owned the hotel at this time, he was being... he had this guy who was trying to get into his good graces, and he's wearing a dog suit at one point, and it's giving all sorts of explanation and context that doesn't necessarily serve the story in any sort of meaningful way to me. Wendy Torrance walking down the hall and seeing something so disturbing and unnerving and unexpected and scary that just sort of represents this general sense that this hotel for decades has had a lot of depraved things happening there, is what is scary. Not knowing exactly who those people are or why they were there or what their motivations were or why some mob boss killed somebody in the presidential suite one time. None of that really serves what I think is actually good about this story. Not giving enough mystery to allow the reader to be scared in general. And maybe this is a bias I have. I really like movies in particular that leave more open to interpretation. And I think The Shining does a very good job of that. And I think a lot of the people who like the book and are disappointed in the movie always point to oh, there's so much lore not in the movie, or this was really explained in the book. And just because it was there doesn't mean that's better. I just finished Dr. Sleep book today. I liked it. The Dr. Sleep movie was better than the book though, but I still like both. I do want to talk about Dr. Sleep a lot because I think that is actually a pretty amazing movie in terms of what it pulls off. I'm not familiar with the movie, but I enjoyed the explanations in the book and was still scared. The book still works. It's not that that over-explaining isn't necessarily to the detriment of what makes the book scary. I think the book sort of benefits, or it works more in the book because you have chapters from Jack's perspective, Danny's perspective, and Wendy's perspective. And that's not something I think that could work in a movie. So it's better if you're getting the perspective of someone who isn't totally... Like Jack, finding the scrapbook, learns most of the history of the hotel because, the spirit of the hotel left this here for him to become obsessed with the history of the hotel, basically. And it's implied that Jack found the scrapbook in the movie. There's no acknowledgement of it, but it's on the table in one of the scenes. And maybe there was a deleted scene that acknowledged it. But I think the fact that the book was told through these multiple perspectives made it more palatable that you had Jack sort of understanding this deep lore of history, developing this sort of affection for the hotel, this sense of he has a duty to it. He has a sense of jealousy that the hotel is more interested in the son than him. That makes him more resentful and more inclined to anger towards his family. Because again, it's like even in this regard of him being willing to murder his wife and kid for this hotel, he is still like seen as this weak failure, not good enough. King also took a big issue with how Wendy is depicted in the movie. He thought she was he said, misogynistic because she's just basically a screaming lady. Of all of King's criticisms of the film, I actually feel like this is the weakest, or one that I don't really find myself agreeing with at all. I really like Shelley Duvall's depiction of Wendy. I think the terror of seeing yes, you may have a troubled relationship where you see the flaws in your husband, to find yourself snowed in, trapped in a hotel with the person you thought you loved more than anything trying to kill you. To be like, Shelley Duvall shouldn't have been screaming as much, or like on the verge of a breakdown. Like, that's just a very true thing. What did you want her to be? Like Wonder Woman? Like, let's go girl power? She kind of does. She gets the better of him in some regard. She manages to stab him. She drags him into the fridge. And I feel like those parallels are there in the movie and book. I thought Shelley Duvall did a really good job of acting like she was on the verge of a mental breakdown, which I feel like you probably would be in those circumstances. But still being a competent protector of her son. Is this music too weird? Yeah, she should be screaming. This is just weird criticism. I do feel for Shelley Duvall that... how do I put this? If you've seen any of the behind the scenes or making of The Shining, Kubrick was not an easy filmmaker to work with. And it does genuinely seem like she is literally on the verge of a mental breakdown filming the movie. And I think you see that in her performance. I'm not sure she's an amazing actress as much as she was actually put in a really bad position. So we can ignore that one, right? Jack. Again, we've already sort of talked about this, but the biggest difference is really Jack being more of a human being. Stephen King did not like Jack Nicholson's performance. And I think this is sort of the consensus when you see discussions about people comparing the book and the movie, that Jack Torrance is more of a human being in the book. I think it is more the case that the book is just more sympathetic or compassionate to Jack's position, while acknowledging all his flaws and shortcomings. The movie just doesn't seem as interested in that. So if that is the core thing you like about the book, that his descent into madness and corruption by the hotel is like a metaphor for his substance abuse, that isn't really present in the movie in a meaningful way. And the ending. The biggest literal difference is the end of the book versus the end of the movie. So the end of the movie that I'm sure we're all familiar with, Halloran is coming because Danny's been communicating with him through Shining. So as Jack is trying to murder his wife and kid, you kind of get the idea that Halloran might be coming to save them, but no, Jack instantly kills Halloran when he shows up. So Danny really has to save himself. He runs out into the maze. He cleverly retraces his steps, and his father gets lost in the hedge maze and freezes to death. The ending of the book is more complex. Halloran does show up, but Jack instantly attacks him and incapacitates him, and Danny is left alone on the third floor with his dad chasing him with a roque mallet. Just a hammer instead of an axe in the book. And as he confronts Danny appeals to, like, is there anything left of my father in there? And there is some of loving father Jack Torrance still inside of the body that is really being taken over by the hotel. And so temporarily, Jack does come through, but the hotel basically destroys what is left of Jack in the body. Like, he starts smashing his own face with the croquet mallet. And Danny, that sort of bought some time for Danny to say, I remember what my father forgot, and that's he hasn't done any maintenance on the boiler in the basement for like 24 hours at this point. And while this is kind of the most unbelievable part of the book, that you have a building that will blow up if someone doesn't manually adjust a boiler every 24 hours, that is sort of the plot device of the conclusion of the book, that because the father on this murderous rampage was no longer serving his obligations to the hotel and maintaining the boiler, that it was too late. The boiler's about to explode, so Danny, Halloran, and Wendy run out of the hotel, and the monster can't, or the possessed body of Jack cannot stop the boiler from exploding. Boiler furnaces from back then were highly volatile. I believe that. Yeah, okay. I'm willing to accept there could be some authenticity to that. It did feel a little contrived, though. So I think a lot of people point to this difference in that it both gives Jack a little bit of a redemption arc or some recognition that he's not entirely a monster. So yeah, I think a lot of people prefer the book ending. I like the book ending for what it is. I don't think it would have worked in the movie. And I think what they did with Dr. Sleep, the movie, which tried to marry both the original book and the original movie, is a more satisfying ending than either of the original endings. I do want to point out, in doing some digging, there was originally an epilogue in Kubrick's movie. And I should say there's an epilogue in the book as well, where it shows months later Wendy's recuperating and they're visiting Halloran, who's now working at a resort somewhere on the East Coast, and Danny's fishing. It ends with him fishing, and basically Halloran being like, I'll be there for you, I'll be your friend, life is hard and it's gonna be hard with your powers, Danny. I wish I never had my powers. And he's like, well, you have them. and I'll help you through it. I'll be your friend. So originally, when The Shining came out, apparently this ending was shown in theaters for a day or two before Kubrick decided he didn't like it, and he had all the theaters send the footage back to him to be destroyed. So it originally ended with showing Wendy and Danny in the hospital sometime later. And Ullman, the manager of the hotel, shows up to check on them. But he gives Danny the yellow ball that Jack and Danny had been playing with at the hotel. And there's a sort of sinister implication here that Ullman, the manager, is sort of complicit in the corruption of the hotel. Maybe he's trying to bring Danny back in some way. It is some sort of tease of there being some deeper awareness by the people involved in the hotel that they know it's evil. And it even had like an end screen saying like, the hotel didn't close after this happened. It continues to like host and be the venue for like tragic events or something like that. Yeah, almost implying like the manager knows the hotel needs some sort of sacrifice, something like that. Kubrick's screenwriter said Kubrick mostly wanted to originally include the scene just because he thought he owed it to the audience to show them that Danny and Wendy had made it out okay. But he said, I think Kubrick was on the record saying like, hey, he went to some openings of the movie and thought the ending of them just getting away and that sort of climax and peak moment felt like the finality of the film. Because originally, like, you would see this hospital scene and then it would cut back to the shot of you seeing Jack Torrance, that slow zoom into the photo from 1941, and that more sort of eerie implication that he's always been a part of the hotel. You've always been here, Mr. Torrance. So I actually agree with this is a little goofy, showing the manager as being somewhat complicit or involved in the evil of the hotel. I think it's a good thing they deleted the scene. And as far as I'm aware, this footage doesn't exist anymore. Just someone found these Polaroids somewhere that were taken for continuity reasons, right? Like when you're shooting video, sometimes you just take pictures to be like, oh, that's how that person's hair looked. So if you go to continue the shot, you can refer back to how people looked. I think that's what these are. These are continuity Polaroids. So does that change our perception of the ending? It definitely leans more into the emphasis being on the hotel being this evil character and that being the focus, as opposed to Jack's character arc or lack thereof. Is it in the editor's cut, the 3-hour long one? If you're talking about... So The Shining has two versions, a 2.5-hour version and then like a 2-hour European version. My understanding is that Kubrick just cut more scenes from the movie because he felt that some of it was unnecessary. But I think that's some of the scenes of Halloran coming to save are trying to reach Jack and Wendy at the hotel. The scene of Wendy seeing like all the skeletons and chairs in the ballroom was like a differently added scene. So yeah, I feel like those are some of the differences in the shorter version of The Shining. But no, this, as far as I'm aware, this footage doesn't exist anywhere. And then I want to talk about Dr. Sleep just because I feel like this is a really good movie on its own. We watched it last night in Filmtendo. Thanks for hanging out. Which version would I recommend we watch? I think you watch just the US 2-hour, 25-minute version of The Shining, whatever it is. The shorter version is good too, but it makes it even more, it gives you even less context. I don't think you even hear the line that Danny had ever been abused by Jack in it. Like, I don't think the cuts, I think the cuts were a little too much in the shorter European version. Anyway, so spoilers for Dr. Sleep. It follows basically Danny, many years later as an adult, dealing with his own alcoholism, he finds himself working in what's the word? Where people are dying. He becomes known as Dr. Sleep because he knows when people are about to pass away. And yeah. A rest home? No, there's a hospice. And anyway, there's the parallel in that there's another young child or a teenage girl with the power, a lot of shining power as well. And there's almost like these vampire-esque people that are looking for children who possess these abilities to drain them of their life force. They call it steam. That concept sounds super goofy and like not the kind of thing you would want the sequel to The Shining to be, but it actually works very well, I think. But anyway, I really only wanted to bring it up because I just feel like it gives an incredibly satisfying conclusion that works both for people who like the movie and the book, because it basically gives you the ending of the book. It gives you Jack's character arc and ending for Danny, but in a more satisfying way. Because to protect this girl from these people who are trying to kill her and drain her of her essence, they go back to the hotel. And Danny sort of sacrifices himself and sort of unleashes his own demons to overcome the bad guys of this story. But Danny knowingly turns on the boiler, knowing that if the hotel overcomes him and possesses him, he'll forget about it. And so he basically sacrifices himself to save this girl. So it gives you the finality of the hotel being destroyed in the way Jack had that moment of clarity to all. Except in the book, Jack didn't really do this deliberately. It was almost accidental. Whereas they gave this sort of satisfying conclusion to Danny in the book in a more intentional way. So the book Dr. Sleep is completely different because the hotel was destroyed in the book The Shining. Exactly. So that's why I'm so amazed at how good Dr. Sleep is in how it marries together the book and movie, because it had to reconcile with the fact. I mean, it could have just ignored the fact that the Overlook Hotel existed at all, but it gave us an ending at the Overlook that gave you a sense of finality to that story, while also working with the narrative and new characters and story of Dr. Sleep. I'm amazed at how good this movie is. This movie should not be that good. Yeah, you don't know where you're standing. Also, even Ewan McGregor's adult Danny talking to his father, who is now a ghost of the hotel, the bartender, and him telling him what it was like when their mother passed away. That was that was too good a scene to be in a movie like this. You know what I mean? I was so impressed with this movie. Flanagan is just one of the better. I don't know. Is there anyone making goods? There aren't many people making better scary content than Mike Flanagan right now. You've got your Hereditary, Midsummer guy. What's his face? And Flanagan. Are those my top two? Those might be my top two. Did Ben stream the movie? When we do Filmtendo, we just agree on everyone starts watching the movie at the same time, and then people in Discord can talk about it. Ari Aster, yeah. He's the Hereditary Midsummer guy. I guess I don't know if we got enough into the themes and everything of The Shining. Is there anything people wanted to talk through? I think Stephen King was annoyed with the movie because he didn't come up with the "Here's Johnny" line. Yeah, I don't think he would have come up with the "Here's Johnny" line. Jack Nicholson does play Jack Torrance as like a borderline crazy person from the beginning, which could have ruined the movie, honestly. Like some of the first scenes of Jack Torrance, like meeting Ullman at the hotel for the first time, you already get the sense he's kind of a lunatic, right? I wonder if part of the issue is that if King was thinking of Jack Torrance as like a more exaggerated representation of his worst qualities and his addiction, his own addiction, as in Stephen King's, to see Jack Nicholson play him as just a pretty shallowly flawed, misogynistic piece of shit was something that Stephen King would be way more sensitive about than any sort of random observer of just experiencing this as a story. Uma agrees. Nicholson looked crazy from the start. I think King would have hated the casting. Yeah. Yeah, King's comments about it were sort of oddly, maybe not personal, but he's like, oh, Jack Nicholson's basically playing some of his crazy biker characters from, and he like names some movies Jack Nicholson had been in. And it's just like, that's kind of weird, man. It's all kind of weird. There were sweet moments between Jack and Danny in the book that added to Jack's complexity. And yeah, and that speaks to the complexity you can have with, I mean, I can't relate to this, but like to have an abusive parent, it's not like you necessarily only think of them as an abusive parent, right? Like there could also be a lot of love there too, and that is a very confusing and difficult thing. I read the book as a kid, then saw the miniseries and then the film last. I think that's why I don't like the film. That makes sense. If The Shining to you is the story of a flawed man and his descents into corruption, that is not what you get from the Kubrick film. The Kubrick film is more about the scary idea of a hotel that is corrupted and haunted by the memories of bad things that happen there, and how that is brought out by a child with a heightened sense of things. When the dad's sober, he's a different man. You have hope of a good dad and loving dad and normal dad. When he's drunk, it's Jekyll and Hyde thing, and you still believe there's good inside. I thought sober Jack Torrance was also a very flawed person, though. I don't think it, for me, it wasn't as simple as you have a guy who's corrupted by his alcoholism. I think you also just saw a guy very angry at other people for his lack of success. Did you miss the imaginary friend in the movie? It was cool that you learned that his imaginary friend is himself as an adult. Not sure if that's explored in Dr. Sleep. You mean for Danny, that Tony. Man, I only finished the book a few days ago. I should remember this. Was it explicitly said that Tony was him in the future communicating back to himself? I thought it was said that Tony wasn't another person. It was just Danny manifesting this voice because he couldn't accept mentally that it was just him being able to think these things. Not that it's his adult self. Am I wrong about that? Sorry, I guess maybe I threw myself off with like, it's not his future adult self. It is just him. It's just another way he is trying to reconcile with himself internally. book, Tony was 12-year-old Danny. Yeah, and in the Dr. Sleep movie, they say Tony was just himself, his way of shining. That was just his way of sort of trying to understand it as a child. It's easier to think of it as an imaginary friend. Yeah, like kids have to almost be their own parents sometimes in dysfunctional families. That rings really true. All right, I am definitely finding myself in the camp of someone who liked the book and still very much appreciates the movie for what it is, and accepting the fact that they are two very different things. And to anyone who hasn't seen it, I do recommend Dr. Sleep as a good movie in isolation, but also I think the best possible marriage of the two. All right, there's only one Booktendo left on our schedule, and that is The Handmaid's Tale with Christine next month. I just picked up my copy. I've got it here somewhere. I agreed with Christine that I don't think she has the time to read. I don't think Christine has time to read. But we were going to at night rewatch the first season of The Handmaid's Tale while I'm reading the book. So when Christine comes on, when we do book club at the end of the month or first weekend of December, I'm not sure when. Yeah, maybe I'll tell her what is different in the book. We'll talk about the book, and then we can also talk about differences in the show. Women aren't allowed to read in Gilead. Oh, so we're staying on theme. Giovanni, my understanding is the first season covers pretty much the whole first book except the epilogue. Yes, I've heard that as well, that the first season does not go beyond the first book, but that there is it's been told to me that the ending is a little out there of the book, but I actually don't know anything about that. Only Margaret Atwood I've read is Oryx and Crake, actually. Just kind of strange. So yeah, Handmaid's Tale next month. I've been thinking at a higher level of 2024 Booktendo being a pretty big pivot to non-fiction. I feel like a lot of this year has me sort of selfishly wanting to train my brain to reading again. And that has worked. Was The Shining the longest book we read this year? It might be. But I will be honest with you, when we read Fahrenheit 451 at the very beginning of the year, I would read a couple pages and be like, I've got to look at my phone. There might be something on Instagram I need to see right now. Or I would have to just like read the audiobook, and I heard a bunch of Tim Robbins doing very bad impressions of women. All that to say, I feel like it took 2 or 3 months before I was able to like sit down and read at length. And I feel like I've kind of gotten that back. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow seemed longish. That 100 Years of Solitude is pretty long. Love nonfiction much more. I like both. I just feel like it's hard to think of a book club as doing both at the same time. 100 Years of Solitude felt like 100 years long. Yes, I agree. Yeah, that was a little tough to get through. You've gotten me back into reading. Oh, I love hearing that. Same, I haven't read a big book in so long. Casey? I would like to read Matt Perry's book, either book club or on my own. I don't feel much of a desire to read that one, so you're welcome to read that on your own. Anyway, so I'm not saying these are the books as much as I've just started writing down nonfiction books I am interested in reading. I want to be careful to pick ones that are not too insular, like keep them kind of accessible, but also ones that can lead to enjoyable, interesting conversations, not just devolving into, you know, like I kind of struggle with like how serious of topics we want to tackle without people just sort of feeling bad, or how long the book can be before it just becomes more unattainable for most people. But anyway, here's a list of books I would like to read. So I feel like December will just be a bit of a dead month. And then starting in January, I'll pick it in advance, but starting January, I'd like to do at least a few nonfiction books. Ben should get on Goodreads. Should I do that? Donkey? Do you want to read the donkey book? Travels with a Donkey? I was Googling like a list of like best nonfiction books, and it came up Travels with a Donkey. It's by the guy who wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I think. I vote Ad Mario. I think I'm going to make, on Discord, I think I'll make a post under Booktendo specifically for book recommendations, where maybe I'll list these. Goodreads, you could keep track of books you read, rate them, and keep track of books you want to read, and also suggestions based on books you liked. That sounds like something I should do. Would you ever read a viewer's book? That's an interesting idea. I've never even thought about that. Peyton Marsh. Did you self-publish on Amazon? Is it fiction or nonfiction? According to Goodreads, I've read 945 books since 2018. That's a lot of books. How many of them were comics? Goodreads, it's quasi-social media, like since you add friends and they can see what you're reading. Someone was telling me recently about... There's a movie version of this now. What's it called? Letterbox? Like where you... Letterboxed. I think you're just trying to show prospective dating partners that you like good movies. Is that what it's about? Peyton, you're welcome to plug your book here. I can't promise I or anyone will read it, but that's a pretty cool accomplishment. I wish I was a good enough writer to write a book. Farmers only. Okay, this year we're gonna write farmers only. No, this year I'm gonna join social media. I'm gonna be on Letterboxd, Goodreads, and Farmers Only. It was fun in October doing Filmtendo every week, I have to say. I'm not sure I could keep that up all the time. And I know, there was one more, we watched Honey Boy, which I think not many people were interested in. So it was a pretty small watch party, which is okay. I don't mind it just being, I don't mind picking a few selfish movies, knowing that not a lot of people will be interested. Because otherwise I wouldn't want to do it all the time. maybe twice a month. I think twice a month should be easy to do. Every week might be a lot. My time zone does me no favors. Yeah, it seems like we ended up landing on like these Friday 8:30 p.m. Eastern start times. And that seemed to work for a lot of people. I guess none of us are going out on Friday nights. It would be fun to do a month dedicated to watching several movies from the same actor. Yeah, October worked because it sort of just had the obvious baked-in theme of scary movies. Someone acknowledging Honey Boy was a good opportunity to watch a movie they wouldn't have otherwise picked. See, I kind of like that too. It's not going to be for everyone. Uma says her director. Yeah, like, there could be other monthly themes that help ground things. But if we're only doing like 2 movies a month, it could also just be like, we have a list of movies we like and want to see, you know? And what about Christmas and holiday movies for December? I kind of hate Christmas movies. Is that, that's not just me trying to be a boomer contrarian. Have you ever seen a Christmas movie you actually really liked? Or does it just sort of remind you of your childhood or something? Like, to me, it's like Home Alone 2. That's not actually a good movie. I'm not gonna, like, watch that all the time. Or like Silly Munchkin's Elf. I know a lot of people who talk about how, like, Elf is a modern Christmas movie. A great modern Christmas movie. I don't know. It's okay. I really think it's more just that it reminds people of a certain feeling like around the holidays. But for me, that's eating Christmas cookies or having a tree with some lights on it, you know? That's Christmas is like one of the best and saddest times of the year, I think, because of that nostalgia factor. But I think I agree with Uma. I'm more interested in watching interesting films than being like, let's watch Christmas movies just because it's Christmas. Ben is a curmudgeon? Hey now. No slurs in the chat. That's racist against old people. I think The Matrix is a Christmas movie. I saw this thread recently of people being like, people don't remember how insane the first Matrix movie was when it came out. And I think that's true. That movie was mind-blowing. When did that come out, in like 2001 or something? Did you ever watch The Bear? Christmas can be wild and sad sometimes. I did watch both. I got Disney Plus just to watch The Bear. We watched both seasons very quickly. I haven't touched Disney Plus since. I liked the second season of The Bear way more than the first season. Yeah, that, yeah. Yeah, there's a storyline in The Bear that means a lot to me. That is kind of hard to watch, yeah. The Bear's on Disney Plus. In Canada, we don't have, what's it called? Hulu. Is it Hulu? I don't know. I think in Canada, the way to legally stream The Bear is to have Disney Plus. I think it's the only way. Uh-oh. All right, Uma, are you vice president of Filmtendo? If you have any, are Or what did we said not to do themes, just to do cool movies we want to watch? Uma Jerry. We should do an Uma Thurman month. Is that her name? Yeah, that's her name. Should watch Kill Bill. What else was she in? Batman and Robin. Gattaca. That's a good movie. You guys seen Gattaca? I forgot she was in that. Why don't we just do 4 weeks of Uma Thurman movies? Got some love for Gattaca in here. Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is a little on the nose. That is Tarantino's best movie, though, isn't it? The Producers. The Kill Room. I'm seeing a lot of movies I've never heard of when you look up her discography. Burnt. The War with Grandpa. Huh. All things Uma. I love Pulp Fiction. I like that movie. I don't like a lot of Tarantino. Or I have a very mixed I feel like he's a very mixed bag. What was that? The Hateful Eight? Whiplash. Who brought up Whiplash? We could do Whiplash and La La Land double feature. I like Inglourious Bastards. I thought that was okay. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was pretty great. I thought The Hateful Eight was an awful movie. Melanie 412 loved The Hateful Eight. Wow, I can't believe how much I did not like that movie. Just seemed like someone who just like he just must have been really angry about something while he wrote that movie. Have you seen Killers of the Flower Moon? No, but I really want to. I feel like that's a very long movie to see in theaters, so I haven't gone out to see it. It's like 3.5 hours, right? That's a long time to watch anything when you can't pause it and go eat some ice cream in the middle, you know? Why don't we watch the movies nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars and we have our own Oscars vote? I love that idea. Pin that. Somebody pin that message. When are the Oscars? Also, does anyone care about the Oscars? I like the idea of doing that, even if it's not exactly like it could be just our picks of like what was the best movie this year. I guess it would be easier to ground it in the Oscars, but we'll see. The Monkey Donkey Awards. Yes, silly munchkins. Exactly. The Benskers. Sure. Yeah. Is Killers of the Flower Moon... I think it was going to be on Apple, right? So maybe anyone with Apple TV will be able to watch it at some point once it's done its theatrical run. I would watch that for sure. Whenever that's accessible at home, like only a $5 rental or whatever, I would absolutely be interested in seeing that. I feel like that will be a hard one to watch though, right? Trophy will be a chickpea. You think I could get a trophy somehow? Like, if the best movie of the year is something directed by like Damien Chazelle, I'm just gonna like mail him a chickpea, send him some fan mail. You won the Bensker for best movie. Do we like films with subtitles? I'm okay with films with subtitles. My issue is when we do Filmtendo, people are sort of liking to chat while watching them, I think. Because like people are on Discord talking about the movie they're watching. And if it's a foreign language film that you have to read with a lot of dialogue, I think that will just be a bit harder to experience. But I wouldn't want to like close us off to watching a really good movie just because it doesn't work as well in that way. It would just be harder. Something to think about. Yeah, also Maureen can't read, so that's a bit of a problem for her specifically. I want to watch Parasite. Parasite's kind of the movie I was thinking. Like, I wouldn't want to not watch a movie like Parasite just because, like, I'm not always in the mood, though, to read subtitles either, you know? That's how non-English speakers have to experience every movie. Wait, what? Not everyone speaks English? What are you talking about? All right, I'm going to go eat a bagel now. I hope you like The Shining. I like The Shining. I like the book and the movie. You don't have to like them both, but you don't have to be annoying about it. Ben, you look like Hank Green. Why? Because I shaved my head? Oh, that was something people wanted me to add, right? Was there a Hank Green book? Anthropocene something? The Anthropocene Reviewed. I'll have to look into it. I'll think about it while I'm eating a bagel. All right. Thanks for hanging out. See you next Booktendo.